On the 28th of June, Austria-Hungarian Archduke and heir to the throne Franz Ferdinand was assassinated. This set in motion a series of diplomatic events that consequently led to the outbreak of war that by July of 1914 would have spread across most of Europe. Ferdinand and his wife Sophie were assassinated by Gavrilo Princip, a Serbian nationalist, while on a formal visit to Sarajevo. Ferdinand was shot by Princip at point-blank range while he was traveling in his car from a town hall reception, having earlier that day survived already one assassination attempt. Standing on the car's sideboard was Count Franz von Herock. He was a witness to the assassination and recounted the day vividly. A portion of his translated memoir says, "As the car quickly reversed, a thin stream of blood spurted from His Highness's mouth onto my right cheek. As I was pulling out my handkerchief to wipe the blood away from his mouth, the Duchess cried out to him, 'For God's sake, what has happened to you?' At that she slid off the seat and lay on the floor of the car, with her face between his knees. I had no idea she too was hit, and thought she had simply fainted with fright. Then I heard His Imperial Highness say, 'Sophie, Sophie, don't die. Stay alive for the children.' At this I seized the Archduke by the collar of his uniform to stop his head from dropping forward, and asked him if he was in great pain. He answered me distinctly, 'It is nothing.' His face began to twist somewhat, but he went on repeating 6 or 7 more times, ever more faintly as he gradually lost consciousness, 'It's nothing.' Then came a brief pause, followed by a convulsive rattle in his throat, caused by a loss of blood. This ceased on arrival at the governor's residence. The two unconscious bodies were carried into the building where their death was soon established. The assassination left the Austro-Hungarians with a perfect opportunity. A great majority of the Austro-Hungarian government had been waiting for an excuse to start war with Serbia, but did not have a legitimate reason to do so. Ferdinand's death gave the Austro-Hungarians a perfect excuse to launch what they believed to be a limited war against a weaker nation. Ferdinand's death was not mourned much by the majority of the government, or by the emperor himself, Franz Joseph, who they both disagreed frequently on many political subjects. The Austro-Hungarian chief in staff and commander-in-chief was Conrad von Hotzendorf. For years he had been pressing for surprise attacks against Austro-Hungaria's enemies. He was pleading for permission to launch an attack on Serbia before they declared war, to surprise the Serbians. But Prime Minister Tisza argued that attacking Serbia, whose involvement in Ferdinand's murder is still today unproven, should be dealt with diplomatically. Tisza was aware that war with Serbia could escalate into a general European conflict that, through consequences of the treaty system, could be much bigger than expected. For Russia was bound by agreement with Serbia to protect her in the event of attack. Further, the dual alliance between Germany and Austria-Hungary stated that if either found itself at war with Russia, the other would enter the fray to provide assistance. Similarly, the Franco-Russian Military Convention of 1892 provided that French assistance should be offered to Russia if it find itself at war with either Germany or Austria-Hungary, and Britain was in effect as a result of a number of agreements, although not technically bound to aid France should she be at war with Germany. The Austro-Hungarians were inclined to believe, however, that Russia would limit herself to diplomatic indecision rather than go to war with Austria-Hungary, and therefore with Germany. Nevertheless, Tisza was keen to ensure that, should the unthinkable occur, and Austria-Hungary actually found itself at war with Russia, Germany would prove willing to honor her treaty obligations. Germany, who to all intents and purposes appeared to be spoiling for confrontation, offered what became known as the blank check to Austria-Hungary on the 6th of July. In this diplomatic communication from German Kaiser Wilhelm II, Austria-Hungary was promised unconditional support from Germany, regardless whatever action Austria-Hungary decided to take in punishing Serbia. Much encouraged by support from Germany, Austria-Hungary issued an ultimatum to Serbia on the 23rd of July that effectively revoked Serbia's national sovereignty. Amazingly, the Serbians agreed with much of Austria-Hungary's demands, but the few they declined were enough for Austria to declare war on the 28th of July, 1914. Then, on the 31st of July, as Russia moved in on the German border, the Germans demanded they immediately demobilize. Russians had no answer, so the Germans decided to move in on Belgium and France, which were allies of Russia. Germany delivered an ultimatum to Belgium on the evening of August 2nd, requiring that she remain neutral while German troops occupied the country while en route for France. The following day, the British Foreign Secretary Edward Grey announced to Parliament that Britain would fight to defend Belgian neutrality if necessary. At last, British had openly stated her position. The Belgian King Albert I declared on August 3rd his rejection of Germany's ultimatum. The next day, on August 4th, German troops invaded Belgium. British demanded a satisfactory explanation for the German invasion to be delivered by 11 p.m. for a decision to march in on Belgian territory at Greenwich. When it was not forthcoming at the appointed hour, Britain completed the European lineup by announcing a state of war with Germany. In January 1917, the Germans announced that their submarines would sink without warning any ship in the waters around Britain. This policy was called unrestricted submarine warfare. Germans had tried this policy before. A German submarine in 1915 had sunk a British passenger ship that killed 128 U.S. citizens. Germany claimed that the ship had been carrying ammunition, which turned out to be true. Nevertheless, the public was outraged in America. President Wilson sent strong protests to Germany. After 2 further attacks, the Germans finally agreed to stop attacking neutral passenger ships. However, they returned to the unrestricted submarine warfare in 1917. They knew it might lead to war with the United States, but they gambled that their naval blockade would starve Britain into defeat before the United States could mobilize. Ignoring warnings by President Wilson, German U-boats sank 3 more American ships. In February 1917, another German attack pushed the United States closer to war. The British intercepted a telegram from Germany's Foreign Secretary Arthur Zimmermann to the German ambassador in Mexico. The message said that Germany would help Mexico reconquer the land it had lost in the United States if Mexico would ally itself with Germany. The British decoded the message and gave it to the U.S. government. When the Zimmermann note was made public, Americans called for a war against Germany. Even before news of the note, many Americans had sided with the Allies. A large part of the American population felt a bond with England. The two nations shared a common ancestry and language, as well as similar democratic institutions and legal systems. The United States was one of the final countries to enter their name in the war. After their declaration, the war was well underway.